one of us gets to smash one of these at the end, right?
Yep.
That's how that all works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's close to the metal. It's a metal
totally
show,
fair, yeah.
right? That's I just assume that's how that works. Hello, everybody who is tuning in right now. This is Close to the Metal, our weekly show here at Digital Trends, where we delve into the more finer intricacies of computing or gaming or something really specific that we get down to. And today we are talking about the AMD 460 and the AMD 470. So as we're going through this, if you're watching live on YouTube, we want to hear your comments, your questions. We're going to go through it in pretty big detail. We've got a series of things we're going to get to with it. But yeah, let us know what you want to talk about, what you want to discuss, and we will bring it up as long as it is, PC within limits. I'm your host, Greg Nibbler, and joining us today, we have Matt Smith is out, but we do have, of course, as usual,
Brad Burke.
Mr. Brad Burke, and a special guest appearance today.
Mr. Parker Hall.
Parker, and what's your role here at Digital Trends?
I write AV entertainment news mostly. Yeah,
all right. So you're an AMD expert.
I'm an AMD expert, of course. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get down this. So AMD, has been coming out with these cards this year in an attempt to. Well, Brad, I mean, maybe you would be better off explaining this, but these are definitely their new line. They had the 480 that came out, the RX 480, which is kind of their top end of this Polaris series.
Yeah, so we talked about the RX 480 a bit before, and that's, like $200. That's your top of the line card for them. Mm-hmm. They kind of weren't able to compete with NVIDIA last year at the high end. So instead they targeted this really $100 to $300 range, and they said that's where we're going to make cards, and that's what, people are actually buying. So that's their card, and it's 1440p. It's pretty smooth, and they initially released that sort of to show off the line, and then this is the rest of the family here, the 470 and the 460. So they only went down from there, which was kind of interesting. People sort of
not going back
a
up.
490 for them to say and here's our 4K card, but not yet.
Why do you think they did that? Just because they realized NVIDIA's got that higher end. We're not even going to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, I think, at $300, at $350, I don't think they'd be able to compete with the 1070 or the 1060.
Yeah.
Those cards are just, the performance there is just better. So instead, they're just playing in a field where NVIDIA isn't even trying.
Okay. So, and so these new ones that they've come out with, the 470 and the 460, what's different then since they are going down from the 480?
So the interesting thing here is that these two cards are very, very similar, the 470 and the 480. There's a very slight performance difference between them, but really the feature difference here is that the top-end 480 has VR capabilities. It's certified ready for VR.
Okay.
But these other two are not, although we did see that the 470 was actually doing pretty well on the Steam VR performance test, so it might work with some games.
But it's not technically really set up for that.
No.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is that all of these cards are from the same family, and they all got the whole feature set. So you got things like Crossfire, which means you can put multiple of them in one system. Eyefinity, so you can use one card to run multiple monitors with one game, which is sort of cool. You can stretch the game out across
that's awesome.
Multiple screens, as well as a really high level of support for DirectX 12 and the new Vulkan API. We've seen really, really strong performance from these cards on Vulkan in Doom. It's pretty much the only game that's really supporting it right now. But they're all really, really strong feature set.
Okay.
Yeah, across the board.
All right. Well, let's get into this. Why do you think they've offered this 470 compared to the 480? Since it doesn't seem like it's.
So that's kind of my question. Is that you've got about a 5% real world performance difference, 10%, about a 15% synthetic performance benchmark difference, which to me is kind of confusing. If you're spending $200 on a graphics card, you might as well just spend the extra $20 and get the VR ready and
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point. Parker, what do you think about this?
It's a percent a dollar at that point, if you're going to be spending hundreds of hours playing video games on your new machine.
Yeah, what's $20 at that point?
You're going to spend it on the game anyway.
Why would somebody drop that? Not spend the extra $20 just if they don't care about VR, if they're not interested in that. Is there any real difference?
One of the things that we'll get to with this too is availability.
Okay.
Availability can be kind of tough on the 480 right now, which might kind of push you towards the 470. But for now, I don't see much of a reason. All of these cards are awful and hard to find. So that's
really?
sort of we can pull up on Newegg. I bet you we can't find an RX 460 to save our lives on the show right now.
It's just because there's that.
Monday.
Okay.
This one was Monday, and this one was Monday, and this one was Thursday of last week.
So they just came out Monday. It's just the demand is that high for these. Everybody wants them.
Actually, this one is available right now, as well as a $109 one. So there actually are some of these 460s out there.
Okay, and we'll get into that kind of the pricing differences and everything with that. But let's go back to what we were talking about with DirectX and Vulkan and FreeSync and all
Yes.
DirectX 12. So what do we have here with these? What are the differences on that?
It's all the same. So
all
all
the
these
same.
cards,
They all
everything,
they all
which
run
is
the exact
super
same.
nice. Yeah, and especially we've really seen, most games that are out right now are DirectX 11, and that's that's the standard. It's been the standard for a few years. Games that are coming out, we've seen Hitman, Rise of the Tomb Raider, there are a couple others that are DirectX 12 compatible. And the AMD cards, that's one area where they really take a strong lead.
Okay.
That's one area where especially reviews of the 480 versus the 1060 were showing a strong performance bonus for the RX 480 when running games in Vulkan or running games in DirectX 12. And Vulkan is sort of like DirectX 12, but it's like AMD's
AMD's
open
own
source
version.
effort at making their own API.
Gotcha.
But they've actually, interestingly enough, not to get too far off track, but they actually have found really good performance on Linux with Vulkan.
Really?
That rivals actually performance on the same hardware in DirectX 12. So it's pretty interesting stuff because no one's really usually able to make an API that beats out DirectX 12.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the actual hardware of these. Just looking at them, and clearly they've done some different things with the design on them. Two fans on the 460.
Yeah. So one of the things we're looking at here too is that this is a reference design.
Okay.
So the RX 480 AMD built this card. They put a shroud on it, a backplate. Actually, I don't think this one has a backplate. No, but they put a shroud on it, and that's their card. It's their blower. It's their thermal design. Everything. This is actually a Sapphire card. So, with graphics cards, AMD makes this part right here, and then they send a bunch of them out to manufacturers like EVGA, MSI, Sapphire, everybody, and they put their own coolers on them in a lot of cases, which is why we have something like this. So this is actually, Sapphire's cooler that they've designed, as opposed to this one where they've just sort of modified the reference design a bit. They've given it this, silver,
kind of
a nice
chrome
backplate
plating.
on the back, which I like. So
I
just
guess
a nice
that'd be a
little-
reason to buy that card if you had a silver themed computer.
Yep. There you go.
To save $20.
Yep. You can save $20 and you get to match your color scheme. So that's definitely an advantage.
There you go. Yeah, that's the big
reason.
advantage. It comes in chrome. All right, so moving on from that, let's take a look at some of the performance issues because this is really what we're getting down to.
Yeah.
What the differences are here, what the advantages are compared to some of the other ones out on the market, and why you would want to go with these. So do you want to start with the 480 and work down? I know we've kind of covered the 480 quite a bit.
Yeah,
Go into the
we could just
470.
mention real quick on the 480. If you're not too familiar, we saw it basically running all of our games in our test suite, besides Crysis 3, because that game is horribly demanding. We saw it run 60 frames per second plus at 1440p, and that's sort of the goal right now for PC gaming is to hit 60 frames per second. Most conventional monitors are 60 hertz, so it just works well. That's sort of like the people have 75 or 144 hertz, 200 hertz screens, but that's a good place to start.
If you're going for something like that, you'd probably go for the NVIDIA then.
Right, you would probably end up with a much higher end graphics solution if you're at like 200 hertz. Yeah.
Okay. So that's what we're looking at with the 480.
Right. And the 470 is actually it's very similar. Like I said, we saw anywhere from like a 5 to 10% performance dip from the 480 in real world benchmarks, and that means I fire up Fallout 4 and I run around and record my frame rate while I'm doing it, and we take averages and over multiple tests and all this stuff. But that's our average frame rate it's 58 on the 470 you can see and 62. So the 480 just barely makes it on 1440p with Fallout 4, just like cranked, everything turned up, settings all the way up, and the 470 is just short, but not like 2 frames per second isn't a killer.
Okay. Is Fallout kind of the benchmark one you use to test things?
I personally think it's a good one to test on. It's not too hard for a system to actually run, but the cap is really high. Like you can really, high-end
push the
systems
limit on
can
it?
really get pushed on it. So,
Okay.
I think it scales really well.
Okay. All right, so that's what we're looking at with that. Moving down, we're talking about 1440p gaming with the RX 480.
Yeah.
So that's what we can get up with there.
Yeah.
Now with the 470, what are we looking at comparative?
That's about 62 versus 58 on
Yeah.
there. So it's only a 4% or 4 FPS difference, which is it's not, it's not
Is that
huge.
noticeable? Is that
only in a technical sense that in our case we found
like you'd have to really study it to notice the difference?
Yeah, I mean it's running at about 60 frames per second. But
Okay.
the nice thing is that with a 60 hertz monitor, you want to be a couple frames a second above it so that you're never falling below it, and then you can keep VSync on, and you're never having to worry about tearing or things like that as you move below 60 frames per second. So it's maybe a little more consistent, but 4 frames per second on a test like that is almost within a margin of error.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to say whether there's much of it. I mean, there is a difference, but
is it really going to be enough to make you actually notice that in the long run? So 5% on that. Now, how I'm noticing in here, I'm just kind of looking through the notes here. That Brad, I sent him over a spreadsheet. By the way, side note, Brad apparently keeps a spreadsheet for watching his Simpsons episodes to keep track of those. So just wanted to make sure we got that in there.
Got to catch them all, man.
Yeah, a spreadsheet for them. You should share that
rankings,
spreadsheet with rankings of the episodes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, not to go off topic there, but I had to make sure we knew. So you did say something with 15 in synthetic tests. What does that mean? Okay, so because I have no idea what that even means.
So we run 2 types of tests on graphics cards. We run gaming tests, which is, like I said, I open up Counter-Strike and I run around an empty level and I record my frames per second.
And you do that with all 3 of these?
Yeah, I do that with all 3 of these.
How long do you play?
We usually do minute-long reads of what's going on, and we do like a warm-up period first to get the card going, where we run some like demo software that kind of like renders things to get them warmed up, and then we run our game tests.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll usually do minutes, and we'll do a number of runs at each quality setting, and then average those runs to weed out any weird anomalies.
Cool. That's got to be rough.
Yeah, it's always funny we talk about that people walk by the office and I'm sitting in there and I'm like, I've got Counter-Strike up and I'm staring at it and I'm listening to a podcast or something and people are like, oh, just playing games. And it's like, no, not really. Like, I'm sort of running in circles in Counter-Strike.
I'm working.
I'm very bored.
Yeah.
Counter-Strike right now.
Yeah, it's really, For a few hours of that, you're kind of over Fallout 4. The other type of test we do is we use 3D Mark, which is a program for Steam. You download it like a game, and it runs these little benchmarks. There's a new one that just came out called Time Spy, and they're little they're fun little demos. At this point, I've seen them all hundreds of times, but it's like fighting lava guy with and it just runs these tests, and at the end it spits out a score, and it says based on the number of the frame rate generation over the course of it, as well as its ability to keep up with the test itself. They're really, really demanding tests, so they really push a graphics card to its limit.
Okay.
So it just gives us an idea of in a controlled environment in a lab, what do these cards look like? What are they capable of producing?
And that's probably with an ideal computer as well.
Right. So yeah, the system we're using is what we call an X99 system. So it's got Intel's fastest consumer 10-core processor, and basically what that does is it allows us to keep a consistent read across many graphics cards, as well as the CPU won't bottleneck anything. So it's not like we have a slow CPU that maybe we put that 1080 in and now it's not running as fast as it should because the CPU can't keep up.
Yeah.
And it's all, nothing's limited. But the big difference there is that we saw about a 15% difference on our 3D Mark tests. And one of the things that shows, at least to me, is that maybe there's more efficiency there, that a test like Firestrike or Time Spy is able to stress the graphics card and really get more performance out of it than a game might. And that shows, especially with Time Spy is a DirectX 12 test, and the hardware support is really good for that on the AMD side, and that means it takes a strong lead over even the 980 from last year. So that's it's a lot of, there's more headroom I think there from our synthetic tests.
I know you guys have been really excited about these cards because the reviews, which you can see at digitaltrends.com as well, you can go there and read really in-depth reviews of everything that's happening with these cards. But yeah, you guys have been really excited with them. We've got a question here in the chat right now on YouTube. Megadeth71, which is perfect for close to the metal, is asking GTX 950 or RX 460.
So that is a little bit tougher of a question, I think. I would say that the RX 460 is going to outperform the 950 in anything with DirectX 12, as well as I think just most things. But they're really different cards.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the next thing we're going to talk about anyway is that, who are these cards kind of for?
Yeah.
And the 950, at least last year, was very much a mid-range casual gaming card. It was it's a big card. It requires power. It requires it to be in a gaming PC because you got to have the space for it. You got to have the power supply. The RX 460 is different. It's more like the GTX 750 Ti, which was an NVIDIA card from about 3 years ago that's still very popular because it's lightweight performance. It's not going to run like Rise of the Tomb Raider maxed out at every set. It's not going to hit those big, fancy AAA games. But like any casual game you're going to pick up, you can just throw it in that system.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry.
You don't have to worry about it. It's almost not a gaming card. Like people used to put graphics cards in all their PCs because you didn't have integrated graphics. Mm-hmm. And integrated graphics have gotten better to the point where if you're not playing games, you don't need a graphics card. And the RX 460 is almost like, well, but you could.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't cost a lot. You could just throw this one in there. Yeah, why not? Like
yeah. Well, let's look at that with the RX 460. So comparatively to the 470, performance wise,
it's about 40%.
40%.
So I would say this one is about 50% of that one in terms of raw performance.
Okay, from 480 to 460.
From the 480 to 460 is it's about half the card.
So it's 1080p gaming basically at 60 frames. Or?
I wouldn't say it's 1080p at 60 frames. We at Ultra at 1080p, it's going to hit. Decent frame rates. Let me pull up the numbers here in front of me so I don't misquote my own readings.
Your own article.
At 1080p, so
actually, Brad, that is not what you said.
Pardon me, Brad.
At ultra quality 1080p, the RX 460 hits 47 frames per second.
Okay.
So and especially it's almost there. Especially if you put it up to 1440p, we actually got 31 frames per second in Fallout 4 at Ultra. So, the one thing to keep in mind here is that they're saying, AMD is saying, this is console level performance or esports performance. That's what they're targeting this card towards, which is a little odd. But when you think about, the Xbox One and the PS4, those systems are rendering games at 900p or maybe 1080p in some games, never over 30 frames per second usually. Like that's...
Okay.
Kind of a hard cap.
It really is console level.
But the fact that this card is able to keep 31 frames per second at 1440p in Fallout 4 with ultra detail, and the other thing about consoles is they're not playing at ultra. People usually say it's about medium to high depending on the game. Mm-hmm. So, this card is still massively outpacing those systems for $100. And when you take into account like this card might really, really, for the first time in a while be enabling a $300 gaming system.
Wow!
So it's exciting.
That is pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely.
A total package. So if you think you could build one for $300 using this card,
I'm definitely going to be looking into it because I think that and the Pentium G3258, which some people will recognize as a kind of a perennial favorite budget chip. Mm-hmm. I think you could build a not a system again that's going to like crank out 60 frames per second and Fallout with all the settings going wild or play the newest games, but if you're playing Rocket League, if you're playing Overwatch, you're playing Counter-Strike, you're playing Dota. I mean, the games that, when you look at the Steam hardware tracker, those are the games that people are really playing.
Yeah.
People aren't just playing, like, Crysis.
Yeah.
People are playing Pain World or RimWorld and, all these games that just could use a little extra juice, and that's what this card is.
It's being asked here about the 460. Do you think the RX 460 will get better with driver updates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, well, I think less with driver updates and more with DirectX 12 inclusion in more games.
Gotcha.
I think you're
so
really
more games that have that.
New games, now that it's really out there in the world, new games are going to be using DirectX 12. They're going to be using Vulkan. And these cards are, the 460 especially, they're all really well suited for that. They're all very forward-facing.
Okay, and just a couple more questions, too. And if you do have some, go ahead and drop those there into YouTube. We're going to be going on to some other things with these, get into pricing and that coming up. But it's being asked, what about the GTX 970 versus the RX 470?
I mean, the 970 is still like a $300 card.
Yeah,
and,
compared to this. What's the RX 470? I guess we're going to get into that here in a second.
Yeah.
But
180.
Yeah.
For the RX 470. That being said, the GTX 980 isn't... I mean, the 970 is kind of... I wouldn't say it's falling off, but it's going to become less relevant. That being said, it still is really good card for 1440p gaming. I mean, it's still solid, but for $100 less, these cards are just as solid.
Yeah.
So I don't have any benchmarks, unfortunately, for the 470 in front of me.
Okay, that's fine.
But
well, okay, and going on with that, like I said, if you do have some more questions, go ahead and pop those in there. We'll get to them. But let's talk about who these cards are for.
Yeah.
Who are they targeting with this? Obviously not the super high-end NVIDIA crowd that's willing to drop $300-400 on just a graphics.
$3,000 on a computer.
Yeah, $3,000 computer, and maybe not necessarily the $300 computer crowd, but where are we looking at for these?
I think this is the kind of card I've been helping some friends build systems lately, and I think the RX 480 is a card I've been recommending a lot.
Yeah.
It's, I think if you are really like, I'm a serious gamer and I play the new game immediately when it comes out, I want this, then yeah, you're going to want like a 1070, a 1080. I mean, I think the 1080 is, those are still $600-700, and that's a whole lot to spend on a graphics card.
Right. If you're mentioning, if you can drop that much money, then okay.
But the 970, the GTX 970
on just gaming, then this isn't the card for you.
Right. The GTX 970 was and is incredibly popular. Like probably the most popular single car GPU in quite some time. But this card is just right now it's a better offering.
Yeah.
I think you're going to save some money. You're going to get better performance, better feature set. But a lot of people, the other thing is they aren't going to be willing to switch over.
Yeah, really?
I think people are going to really want that 1070 instead.
Just because of the namesake, or just because of the stigma,
and,
or they don't trust it.
Something we've talked about before with these is that NVIDIA is very much about making its own software, its own APIs, and working with developers to include those in games. Uh-huh. There's things like NVIDIA has Hairworks, I think is what it's called, and it's literally a software support, driver support for hair. And it's something that people noticed if you turn it on, when you're on an AMD card, it works like crap. It just like slows the game down. In games like Witcher 3, people especially notice this because they're not working with other hardware manufacturers, whereas AMD has said, I think with the exception of like Crossfire and Eyefinity, the DirectX 12 stuff, the Vulkan stuff is open source, so you can have that. You can play that on Linux. It's really great.
Yeah, you can work on it with anything.
FreeSync is part of the DisplayPort standard, so you don't really have to do anything to enable it. You can include it with your DisplayPort, your TVs, your monitors, whatever. So you get an adaptive refresh rate, which is great. And I think that's a reason.
It sounds like this is kind of like the everyman's.
That's what they're shooting for. Yeah, they're trying to regain that because again they try to compete at the $500-600 price point and we're unable to.
It's just not going to work out.
Yeah.
So we're looking at for the 480. I'm sorry. What is the 480?
480 is 200.
200,
and then 180 for the 470. And
which,
I think these
again, we talked about this at the beginning. Like, why if you're already spending $180, why not just $20 more?
Right.
Yeah, and you get the VR.
And then if you do decide you want a VR, you borrow your friend's Rift for the weekend. And you're set.
Then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, but these cards are for people building gaming PCs.
Yeah.
Or even, just a high-end PC. You don't build a really high-end PC and not put any kind of, I think, discrete GPU in it. And if you're going to spend a couple $100, there you go. You're ready to game at 1440p, no problem. 460 is for somebody different.
Yeah, who is the 460 going for?
The 460 is like, I just built a computer for my friend. He just wanted to play Rocket League, and he was going to buy an Xbox to play Rocket League.
And just Rocket League.
And instead,
I really love Rocket League.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And instead, I had like an old 750 Ti laying around, and I gave him that, and it works great. That card runs Rocket League awesome, and he doesn't need anything crazy. That card also it runs Battlefield 4 just fine. And I think this is that card now.
Yeah.
That there hasn't been a 750 Ti in a minute. There hasn't been that card that's casual gaming performance, really good price. Throw it on your parts list when you're building your next desk PC. And then if you want to play some games or do something a little more demanding, it's there. I think that's
you have it as a backup. Something you can utilize if you need it.
And the other thing about this one is it has a 6-pin PCI power connection.
The sirens are actually happening, just so everybody knows. If you're downtown Portland. So what was it?
It has a 6-pin PCIe power connection, but the thing about it is that it only uses 75 watts of power.
Yeah, then actually somebody was bringing this up about the power consumption on each of these. So that uses 75 watts.
So these are the 480 and the 470 are about the same, except the 480 there were some power issues. We talked about it in a previous episode, and those have been, I think, for the most part, ameliorated by driver updates that have pushed power back onto the PCI cable. But I recommend if you're buying a 480 to buy one with an 8-pin instead of a 6-pin. I don't know which manufacturers are doing which, but you get better power support.
That's a 6-pin there.
It's just a 6-pin on the reference design. 6-pin as well on here, and I think this is also 150 watt TDP, just like the 480. This one is half that.
So it's kind of half everything.
Yeah.
It is kind of half everything.
Half power and half power.
And and that makes more sense to me to say I'm going to pay 50% of the thing to get 50% of the performance than to say I'm going to pay 10% less for 10% performance.
Right.
You know, like these are sort of almost the same. Whereas this is like, again, like if I've got like a computer laying around and I've got a 450 watt power supply, it's like I can probably throw that in there.
Yeah, for
and
$100.
All of a sudden, that really cheap gaming PC or the PC I've had in my closet, all of a sudden it can play the games. You know, I can play Rocket League or Counter Strike on it. You know, whatever.
Again with the Rocket League. God, really love
Rocket League. I love Rocket League. It's important.
Deep in the heart.
Okay, it's being asked about, again, the pricing. Well, you said this, that these are going to be difficult to find right now.
I said that, and I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah.
That they're not.
No, you found them.
The RX 460 is readily available on Newegg in a number of forms. Although I recommend, you know, there's always there's a 2 gigabyte and a 4 gigabyte version of this RX 460.
Yeah, someone was asking which one would you go for? What's the big difference between the two?
I know I might get some flack for this. I think the 2 gigabyte one is the right choice.
Why is that?
Well, I will say that
Does it have to do with Rocket League?
Games increasingly are using more VRAM. Yeah, it does have to do with it. No, it doesn't. Games are increasingly using more graphical memory, and a lot of people have been pushing, you know, especially here, you've got a 4 and an 8, and you got a 4 here, and that's sort of becoming the standard is to have 4 or 8 or 6 or whatever. But I will say, I play Overwatch at home at 1440p on Epic settings, and I only use 1.5 gigs of graphical memory.
So you think you only need the 2?
You know, it just really
What's the
depends what game you're
harm? What's the
playing.
harm on getting the 4?
An extra $40.
Okay.
So
At
I mean,
which
like
point,
at
it's
$100,
40 more
it does
bucks.
kind of,
Yeah.
you know, it might blow out your budget if you're trying to build like a really budget conscious PC. That might blow your budget. That $40-$50.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're going to be playing games that are big and have a lot of high resolution textures, games like Witcher 3, GTA 5, then you kind of do want that 4 gigabyte. But the catch is that you're not going to be able to run those at the ultra epic texture settings on this 460.
Why is that?
It just doesn't have the gas
capability
to run those games smoothly. So you're going to be turning down your texture settings on those games anyway.
So the 4 gigs kind of useless.
It's like putting
I
a
wouldn't say
giant
it's
gas
useless,
tank on your.
but yeah,
Prius.
exactly.
There we go. Yeah.
Well, not why
Great.
I bought this in the first
Carry
place.
a lot of gas. But
Exactly. And
That's
it's
a
like
great analogy.
you might never use that second, 2 gigs of VRAM again. Like games are using more, they're also becoming more efficient at the same time. And the kind of games that this card is going to want to play at the settings it's going to want to play them, I don't think you're going to hit that 2 gig mark. And I want to do some testing to kind of verify whether that's true before I go around recommending it, but here we are.
Okay. All right. Let's see. It's being asked, is the RX 480 worth $300? No, it is. It's $200.
It is, well, so that's the availability thing is that,
Or it
the
depends,
the
okay.
460 is easily available. Let's see, the 470 is also pretty available. We've got this one actually here is $200 even, $210 for the one if you want this cooler, $250 if you want the so that
It varies depending on.
it is about $250 for an RX 480 or 470 right now.
So
about that
availability
actually for a 480, you can buy a reference 480.
So they're actually the same price now.
But the 480s are all out of stock.
And that's
So
it.
there are a
That
few
makes
470s
sense.
on Newegg, but 480s are not readily available still.
So as a consumer now, I mean, which do you buy if you're, one of them's the one you really want is out of stock, and the one that you kind of want is the same price but in stock.
So that might give the 470 an edge right now. Is
just
that-
because of availability.
just
Yeah.
because if you got to build a computer like this week,
I've got to play.
and maybe you might have to settle for the if you got if it's like I'm placing an Amazon order
1440p
in
run
an hour, so it'll
tomorrow.
be here for tomorrow. Yeah, you might have to
It's
go
an
with.
emergency.
And that's sort of the danger of paper launches. AMD's been a lot better about it, I think, than NVIDIA has. NVIDIA has been very much like, check it out, our 1060s here, and they've got a reference design, and there's like 40 of them, and everyone's
price.
running around screaming trying to find them and reselling them on eBay and all this stuff. I'm glad to see that the 460 is just on Newegg, ready to buy,
Okay. All
Well,
right.
and both
pleasing.
of them seem, the 460 and 70 seem pretty available.
which may show that really
it's
people
only
do
been a
want
week,
is that,
so-
yeah. Maybe I'm wrong, and $110 for this thing is twice the price. That's what people want.
I mean, one of them is a 1440p fully fledged, middle high end gaming
Yeah.
card, and the other one is definitely not. But at the same time, I think as a niche product, the lower end card makes sense.
I think so, personally.
Yeah.
The other thing, I guess, to note is that according to the Steam hardware survey, people aren't moving to 1440p displays very quickly. That was something I always thought was happening. Matt thought was happening. Turns out people are not making a very quick switch to higher than 1080p panels. Most people are still playing at 1136 by 768. I think about 35% are on 1080p.
Do you think it'll slowly leap to 1440, or will it just jump to 4K?
I just don't. It's right now like 1440p displays grew 0.04% last month, which is almost nothing.
Yeah.
And also, headset ownership is also really, really low compared to the number of users who have Steam. So, that might be another reason people are going for the 470. They're just saying, this thing's ready. I don't need VR. I'm not going to get VR, so here's my card.
Now, gaming-wise, what about Crossfire?
They all support Crossfire, which is cool because none of the other, the 1060, so NVIDIA's lowest end, doesn't support it because two 1060s would be better performance than a 1080 at $200 less the price.
Gotcha.
Instead, AMD's like, do whatever, have fun. So part of that, we were trying to figure this out the other day, that AMD cards used to support Crossfire between multiple different GPUs. So on the NVIDIA side, you need to have the same GPU in order to use your multi-GPU.
To make that work.
And with DirectX 12, you don't. They've shown some kind of initial prototype like, oh, look, you can use an NVIDIA and an AMD card and, in DX12. But for now, you can Crossfire two of these if you want to. I'm not really sure why, but you could.
What's the performance going to look like if you do that? I mean,
we've seen usually another card adds about 50 to 75% performance depending on the game.
Okay.
Of the
current card. So if you put in a second one of these, it's only going to add another 50% performance.
Okay.
Same with this
so
guy.
at that point, I mean, if you're spending $200 on those,
then you get the 480.
Yeah, then you go to the 480.
Which makes more
if you
sense
can find it.
Which makes more sense than selling, this for $80 and then saying, well, but you can't Crossfire it because we don't want you to undercut our other product.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is a little more. Not that NVIDIA didn't say that. What they said was that people, who want to do Crossfire SLI should go for the enthusiast grade hardware, and that people who use low end hardware don't use SLI.
People who use low end hardware are not enthusiasts.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, that is what it is.
That's not what they said either. I don't want to misquote NVIDIA.
It was implied.
It was a little implied.
All right. Any final thoughts on these? Any final questions that you want to get out? And actually, if you're watching via YouTube, we'll take any final questions that you guys have. I'll get those in there. Final thoughts on these three, because you spent a lot of time doing the reviews on these and testing these things out, as we talked about. What are your final thoughts here?
I mean, I think my final thought on this is if you're building a PC and you want a game and you don't necessarily need the craziest, fastest card, you buy the 480.
Yeah.
And if you see a 460 for under $100, you should just buy it.
Just take it.
That's just just a damn good deal.
Right in the closet.
I think I would, if I saw one of these for like 80 or 90 bucks this week, I would probably pick it up and
even if you're not
put it in
gonna
my
use
closet
it.
and I'm going to use that at some point.
So stock up on
Build a computer.
Stock up on 460s.
Make a chair out of them.
As many as you can
Play
get.
Rocket League.
All for Rocket League. All right. Well, there we go. All the in-depth reviews here at digitaltrends.com. You can take a look at each one of these cards and everything else that they've gone through and find out everything. You can leave questions there. You can send us questions, podcast at digitaltrends.com. And we do Close to the Metal every Wednesday at 10 a.m. right here. And if you're just tuning in, or if you're just listening, well, if you're listening to the podcast, you've already heard the beginning. If you're just tuning in on YouTube, you can go back and watch the rest of the video and, kind of get some more information about everything that's been going on with it. So thanks so much, everybody. We will be back next week with another episode.